Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? Social media platforms have been around for a long time now, but every time some sort of scandal involving privacy or personal information crops up, a ton of people get upset. All I can do, though, is just wonder why. So the freshest example of social media behaving badly is this whole Cambridge Analytical scandal involving Facebook. You've probably heard about it around the time this episode went live. It was all over the news, and I'll spare you the details because you've probably heard about it. But in brief, it's about this company that used personal information from a ton of Facebook users to basically influence voter opinion in political elections. This information was used against those end users' knowledge or what it was ever going to be used for. Basically, all this data just got scooped up by Cambridge Analytica, and then they sold their services for these, various purposes. It got to be such a big scandal that even Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, got dragged in front of Congress to testify here in the US. But that's really kind of all that became of it. It was a bunch of softball questioning. I think the most interesting thing that he said during the entire thing was that he was sorry or whatever. It basically just kind of was for show, right? We didn't get any real concrete information out of him about this or any dramatic changes to the way that Facebook was going to operate. There was a little bit of an interesting twist afterwards in that Facebook then announced that it was going to start applying this regulation called the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, worldwide. To cover that a little bit, the GDPR is a new law from the EU that basically is meant to protect or inform consumers about their privacy when online. Now, in my opinion, it doesn't actually do a whole lot, and as written, it really only applies to residents of the EU, although it can have a worldwide approach because you don't have to necessarily be living in the EU for it to apply. So some American companies are getting kind of looped up into this. Facebook was going to have to apply it to EU residents, but as a result of this whole data scandal, they just decided to say, you know what, screw it, we'll just apply it to everyone, regardless of where you live or what jurisdiction your laws cover, anything like that. But the GDPR, it basically just does a few things, at least from the consumer perspective. It makes companies do things like tell consumers what data about them is being collected. It lets consumers get copies of the data collected about them or their data on that platform. It makes companies delete data about those consumers when the consumers request it. If a consumer says, you know what, I don't want to use this service anymore, I want you to delete everything you have about me, the companies under the GDPR have to do it. It also requires that companies get explicit permission from end users before collecting data, and they can't really hide any sort of clauses saying you allow us to do all this kind of thing at the bottom of some really long, lengthy, acceptable use policy kind of document that people aren't going to read and ultimately just click through. It has to be a little bit more of an affirmative type of approach where you have to make it very prominent, this is what we collect, and you have to click OK. And then finally, it makes companies disclose data breaches, which I think generally gets covered by a whole bunch of other laws anyway, but they're throwing it into this one as well. Now, does the GDPR really have all that much to do with social media? Well, yeah, I think it's actually kind of custom tailored to suit social media. It's social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, tons of others, I think were exactly what the legislators, the lawmakers had in mind when they drafted this whole policy. If you ask anyone how a company like Facebook or Twitter makes money, just stop anyone on the street and ask them, hey, how do you think Facebook makes its money? They're going to tell you, of course, well, it's from the ads. And that's pretty obvious because that's the most apparent thing that you see on these platforms. As you're scrolling through your feed, occasionally an ad is going to pop up. Makes sense. Those companies need to pay the bills in order to provide the service that you use. But there's a major difference, though, in how regular websites run ads versus how social media companies run ads. And it all has to do with the relevancy of the ads. You surf to any random website, tech website, news website, whatever, you're going to see a wide variety of ads for a wide variety of stuff. Some of those ads may be interesting to you. They may be advertising a product or service that you might, find relevant for yourself. But a lot of times they don't. I can't tell you how often that I've been surfing the web and just seen tons and tons of ads for stuff that I would just never buy at all, or it doesn't match my demographic, doesn't match any of my interests, anything like that. Now, that is something that the internet is developing more and more and more, is how to target these ads. And the whole concept of tracking cookies and all that kind of stuff plays into it a bit, where if you've ever surfed the web and you've seen an ad that's kind of interesting to you on one website, and then you surf to another website and you see that same ad again, or a similar ad for the same thing, and it seems to follow you around the web, well, that's starting to get into what they call targeted advertising. And it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you want to sell or advertise the things that people want to buy. Don't advertise to me things that I'm never going to buy, because otherwise you're just wasting your money as an advertiser. Advertisers have to pay per impression, per time that the ad runs. And that's just a general thing as to how ads work online. So the thing that social media platforms have an advantage of that no other platforms can even begin to touch is the amount of data that they have in order to run targeted ads. If you think about it, the data that they can collect on you, how you use their platform, all the stuff you say, all the pictures you post, all the tags that you attach to the things that you upload, those all get pulled together and are used to create just kind of a general profile of you as a person, where you live, the kinds of products you buy, the demographic that you match, your age group, your race, your marital status sometimes can play into effect, just all sorts of different attributes and labels that can be applied to you. They all get aggregated together and they form a picture of you. And then that data gets used to figure out which ads to run when you specifically are browsing that site or using that platform. So we've got this just absolute goldmine of data that these platforms have. And in general, they use it to run ads. But we've also started to see these social media platforms using that data, making it accessible or for sale to companies that will use it for their own purposes. And that's kind of where this whole Cambridge Analytica thing comes into play. It's not that Cambridge Analytica was simply giving Facebook a bunch of money saying, hey, when you find people that match, these attributes, run these specific ads against those people. It's more they were pulling all that information from Facebook and doing a lot of that data mining themselves. And that's really what has a lot of people upset, was Facebook gave that information away. It let that information become available. It left Facebook's hands. And a lot of people see that as a breach of trust. Whether you want to even begin to trust a social media platform to begin with, well, that's, I guess, a different discussion. But anyway, the whole thing with the GDPR is it's really meant to just remind consumers about all of this. It doesn't stop social media platforms from collecting the data, because if you opt out, then you basically are useless to that social media platform, and they probably would prevent you from even using it. Like if you disagreed to have any data collected about you, they would just say, oh, fine, okay, you don't agree to our terms and conditions, you don't get to have an account, you're not allowed to sign up, something like that. But basically, it's just meant to allow people to be a bit more cognizant as to what's going on, which is why I think the GDPR is not a very effective approach. It's not as hard hitting as some people think it is. In fact, a lot of people find, from what I've been reading in the GDPR, the most interesting parts to it are not the ones about requiring consent and explaining to end users what data about them is being collected. It's actually more the whole you're allowed to export your data approach. And then also if you ever get sick of that platform, forcing them to delete everything they have about you. Something really interesting kind of tied into this GDPR thing is Instagram I don't believe it's out yet at the time that I'm filming this, but I know they're working on it. A way for you to export basically your entire profile, but including also all of your pictures. So if you ever got to a point where it's like, you know what, I lost all my Instagram pictures after I uploaded them, maybe my phone crashed, whatever, you could actually get a copy of them back. So it's not even so much you know what, I'm sick of Instagram and I'm going to dump them and I'm going to move to some other platform and I just want a copy of my data so I can upload it in mass. It's really more of a, hey, I'd like to get a copy of those pictures again because some of them were really cool type of approach that some people are taking. So in general, I find the GDPR pretty weak. It's not going to force any sort of major changes on the parts of these social media companies. It's really just, I guess, a little bit of hand waving to make consumers feel a bit better. Now, maybe it's the beginning of a larger approach that's going to get taken. Time will tell, but I think it's generally just going to let these companies continue on as they always have been. Now, here's the thing, though. So we talked about ads and how targeted ads are like the real big thing that social media companies have going for them. But there's way more to social media than just direct ads, than just running regular ads for end users. The other big key thing that social media has going for it is actually based on how the platforms themselves work, the concept of social interaction. It's one thing to just run an ad and hope that you've targeted it well enough against the person that you're running it to get them to click it. Because that's ultimately the main goal, right? Is for the companies that run ads for you to click on them. If you're an advertiser, you want people to click because that means that they're really interested. They're going to go to your site and maybe you'll sell something to them. If you're an advertising company, like if you are the one who are running the ads for people, your Facebook, your Twitter, your YouTube, your whatever, you get paid more money when people click. It's not just impressions in terms of you've run the ad, it's you get a little bit extra money when people click on the ad. So there's a major financial benefit to getting people to click. And, you know, that's certainly part of the whole advertising on social media, you know, methodology and business practice. But it's something completely different if you can actually get people to engage with the brand. And this can sometimes be more expensive for advertisers, but sometimes it can be way cheaper. You're basically getting the people to become the advertisers themselves. If you are a company, and instead of just running ads, maybe you engage with certain communities. If you try to strike up conversations, if you run polls, if you run questions, if you try to act friendly and not just, hey, I'm company X, buy my stuff, instead be like, hey, I'm company X, I'm hip and cool, and you know, I identify with your demographic, and hey, let's talk about what's going on in society, and I'm going to use all the cool slang terms that you know your generation uses and all that stuff. Chances are you're going to get people to be a little bit more interested in engaging with you. If you can get people to engage with you, maybe they'll start to share not just more information about themselves, which you as an advertiser can use to your advantage to be able to directly target them better, but also that you can get them to maybe open up and share their experiences with your brand. We see a lot of this, at least from what I've noticed, with car companies. Car companies, like on Twitter, inviting people, hey, share pictures of you with your car, you know, of our brand, right? So if you're a car company and you've got this loyal following of people, you know, hey, share with us, you know, your favorite picture of your car that's from our brand. And then you go and you share the pictures that they sent you. Like, so if you're Twitter, you retweet them or whatever. Now you've got real people doing the advertising for the company. I don't want to belabor the point, but you know the old saying about how word of mouth is the best form of advertising? That's exactly what's going on when you've got direct engagement like that. Not just running an ad, but getting people to talk about their experiences with the brand, preferably positive, and showing other people, other real people, hey, look, real people buy this product. You know, maybe I'm one of them. I own this product and I'm sharing it and I love it. You're going to get other people to, oh, hey, maybe that's actually a good product, instead of just seeing these banner ads going by and, okay, yeah, whatever, people tune out to those. So it's a much deeper form of advertising, and it can be a little bit insidious. Remember, this is not, I don't want to get political, and I don't want this to become a political channel or end up getting into political discussion, although sometimes I can't really kind of help it because of the way that these stories ebb and flow. But around the elections here in the US, the last presidential election, there was lots of talk about these so-called fake accounts going up on social media to try and sway the election. And a lot of those were run by foreign governments. And I don't think we're anywhere near seeing the end of that. It's ongoing and continuing, and it's tough to root them out. But it really kind of, again, applies to that whole principle about word of mouth. It's one thing to run a political ad saying, hey, don't vote for this one person because whatever. And even with the transparency, laws and requirements that are in place about saying, when you run an ad like that, you have to disclose who is running it, who paid for it, that sort of thing. Even with all that in place, it's only so effective. But if you can get seemingly real people to say, hey, don't vote for this person because of whatever, and those people seem to be people that are just like you, that have similar interests, similar life experiences, similar demographic, you're going to be more attuned to listen to them. The problem is when those accounts are fake, is when those people that seemingly are just like you don't exist. They're fake pictures that are stolen from elsewhere on the internet, and it's all computerized and algorithmically generated to target certain people that would be most influential for whatever goal that company or organization or government has in mind. So it really demonstrates just the power that social media actually has, that arguably it's swayed political elections, not just from real people, saying, hey, look, this is, what I want, and I'm going to vote for this person because they're going to do what I want them to do, or they're saying the things that I want them to say, or they have the same goals and ambitions that I do, whatever. It shows that people will just blindly look at a lot of this kind of stuff without digging deeper or actively thinking about, well, does all this make sense? Anything like that. So we've started to see a little bit of a backlash. And I think that's where a lot of people start to get upset about the whole sharing of private information kind of a thing. Despite the fact that without sharing private information, social media would not exist. Is there anything that we can do? I mean, is there a way to have social media and personal privacy? Well, I don't think so, right? I mean, these platforms, they don't exist just because they want to be nice. They don't exist to give a place for someone to hang out online, right? Mark Zuckerberg didn't come up with Facebook because he figured, oh, this would just be cool, and and I'll just spend a lot of my time building up this thing where people can just hang out and share stupid stories they find on the internet and complain about what they had for dinner last night or whatever. No, he came up with it, and all these other social media platforms came up with their platforms, their companies. They spent all the money and time building them up because ultimately they want to make money. That, I think, is the one thing that people forget. And it's kind of hilarious because from earlier in the podcast, we talked about how you ask any random person on the street and they would probably say, oh, well, they make their money running advertising. I think a lot of those people would be oblivious to the fact that that's how the companies make their money, like actually do it. I mean, they think, oh, well, obviously they need to make money in order to, run the platform, fund the servers and pay their employees, that sort of thing. But they don't realize that's actually the goal of the company, is to run advertising. The people using social media, like just you and me, regular people, we aren't the customers of those companies. I'm not a customer of Twitter. Twitter doesn't owe me anything. Instagram doesn't owe me anything. It doesn't owe you anything either. The only time it owes anyone anything is if they spend money to run ads, is if they actually give money. I haven't paid a single dime to Twitter, Instagram, any other social media platform. And neither have the vast, vast majority of people. So why would a social media company want to intentionally deny itself that revenue? Why would a social media company ever say, you know what, okay, fine, we're just not going to collect personal information like that? Because they'd be leaving money on the table. That targeted advertising thing is huge. And I mean, you look at some platforms like Twitter, Twitter's struggling, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about, just how prevalent it is in society and how much a lot of people use it. But Twitter is still struggling for money, and it even has that whole targeted advertising thing going for it. Maybe not as well as it should, but that just goes to show some of these companies, there's not much money on the table they can afford to leave. Now, Facebook, they've just got tons and tons of money, right? I don't think Facebook's going to go anywhere anytime soon, and I don't think Twitter's going to go anywhere either. Worst case scenario, Twitter gets bought by some other company that's maybe better at actually running targeted advertising, better at mining that data. But that's the reason why I just don't think we'll ever see any major push for enhanced privacy in social media, because that's key to how those companies actually work. And so that's the one kind of nugget of truth that I think a lot of people never keep in mind when, these privacy scandals come up and people get all worked up about it. And they demand, oh, well, we want privacy. You need to do a better job protecting our information and blah, 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 blah. And companies like Facebook, they'll always play lip service, because this isn't the first time that we've seen any sort of major privacy flap, especially with regards to Facebook. They always pay lip service to it. Oh, well, we take it seriously. And yes, we're going to do what we can to protect your information. And we're going to make changes. We promise, right? We're going to make changes. They always say that. We're always going to, we're going to push harder to protect you and all that. They just say all these words, but at the end of the day, does anything dramatically change? No. No, it doesn't. That's really kind of the whole thing behind social media is it's meant to gather your information. It's meant to invade your privacy. And on top of that, it's meant to be addictive. We know these platforms are designed to be addictive. There have been countless scientific studies that have kind of proven it, and even former employees from companies like Facebook that have come out and said, yeah, we designed all of this to get people to want to use it as much as they could, because the more that people use it, the more data can be gleaned off of them, and of course, the more money that can be made. So it's I would say, as much technology goes into social media and how it works, and the algorithms and everything that they're able to do to come up with how to target these ads. I mean, there's lots and lots of, as much of a violation as it is of personal privacy or whatever, it is kind of cool to think just how far they've been able to push this kind of stuff and machine learning figure out what data is relevant, what data isn't relevant, put it all together, that sort of thing. I mean, from a more abstract kind of mindset, it's pretty fascinating. It's pretty interesting. But I think the bigger thing is that it's actually a much bigger show and prowess of psychology and sociology to get people to want to spend time doing all of these relatively mindless things, yet willingly give up information about themselves so that the company can run advertising, all under the guise of you ultimately just trying to win approval and validation from others. I mean, that's think about a relatively simple platform like Instagram. Why do people post pictures on Instagram? because they want to get likes. They want to share that. They want that response from other people. It's not necessarily just because they've got a picture and they want to post it and walk away. They go back and check. They see how many likes there have been. They see how many comments there are. There are lots of people who will take trips and vacations specifically for the purpose of getting pictures for Instagram. That is how deeply embedded some people are into the kind of psychological, personal validation portion of social media. They just do it for the attention. And to get people to want to do that, and you can still profit off of them as a company, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? It's just the biggest twist of one's mind that you could possibly think of. Instead of being very direct and saying, look, here's a platform and we're just going to run ads and that's it, to be able to get that deep into someone's life, to get them to want to give you that information so that they can then sell you ads as a customer, it's kind of incredulous, really. So, where do we go from here? Well, I can tell you there will be more privacy and violation scandals. There just will be. We've seen them before. We're going through one, now at the time this video comes out with the whole Facebook thing. We'll go through them again. Guaranteed. Or we'll see other, maybe not personal privacy kind of violations, but things about platforms deleting or limiting content that it doesn't like. We've seen that before too. We've seen that with Facebook. We're going through that with YouTube right now. And I've talked about YouTube and the whole adpocalypse thing before. But, as I'm filming this, the big push and the big gripe against YouTube is that it's starting to go through and crack down on videos that basically talk about topics it doesn't like that may otherwise fall within the rules, but are, again, not going to be topics that advertisers are terribly interested in throwing money at. So they're demonetizing videos about, say, guns and weaponry, that sort of thing, because after the school shootings and after, the outcry from them, it's not a very popular thing right now. And advertisers just want to back away from it because it's a hot political topic that's very divisive. It's incredibly divisive. And so YouTube is just starting to kind of back away from that, demonetizing it, pulling that kind of content. And people are getting worked up about it, and that's causing even more controversies. But it, again, also kind of comes into this whole big picture of, these are companies. The social media, they're just companies. They want to make money. They need to do whatever they need to do to make the advertisers happy. And if that ends up pissing off the end users, well, as long as it's not a debilitating event for the company, as long as it's not pissing off so many people that you've got tons of people leaving en masse, well, in some ways, they just consider that the cost of doing business. And it's also kind of funny for me, as much as people get worked up about when that happens, how people complain about, they're violating, they're censoring us on these platforms. They demonetized my video and I'm being censored. Whatever happened to the First Amendment and the freedom of speech and all that? The people who are claiming that YouTube is violating the First Amendment have absolutely no idea how the First Amendment works. It doesn't apply to private companies. Flat out. It just doesn't apply to private companies. It only applies to the government, at least here in the US. So you've got all of this stuff going on, and it's just going to keep going on because it's just the way these companies run. And I don't think people ever really, I think on the surface they know it, but they never internalized it. They never fully kind of understood that every little interaction that they have on these platforms has consequences. It turns into a data point that's going to get used. So what really can get done? I mean, as consumers, what can we do if we really care about our privacy? If we really care about not having so many targeted ads being, pushed upon us, about not being turned into just a data set or a number, not having social media totally consuming our lives, which it has for a lot of people, what can we do? Well, there's been talk about legislation. And it's been kind of talked about for a while now, and it got brought up again with this whole Facebook and, Cambridge Analytica thing. But I don't think it would be very effective, because for legislation saying, look, you have to protect this personal data, or there's only limited data you can collect, or something like that, it would basically undermine the operations of the company. And generally, the government in the US has been fairly reluctant to more or less say, hey, company, you're not allowed to be a company anymore. Unless it's something totally egregious and otherwise against the law, like dealing with drugs or totally illegal weapons or anything like that. Facebook, I really doubt, say the US government would pass a law saying, hey, Facebook, these are the only few things of data you're allowed to collect, against users. If we do see any more legislation, what we'll see would be things more like the GDPR in Europe, where it's not necessarily going to prevent them from doing things, but it's just going to force them to be more transparent in doing it. Are people going to continue to click through all of those policies and say, yeah, whatever, go ahead, use my data, I want to get back to my Instagram feed? Yes, people will still just mindlessly click through all of that, but at least then they can say that they have been informed or whatever. Another option, other than legislation, would actually be kind of an interesting one, and that is to go to a paid model. This would actually be kind of an easy fix, although it has its own compromise and ramifications. It's simply saying, you know what, no more ads. We're not going to do ads on these social media platforms anymore. Instead, if you want to use Facebook, it's going to cost you $2 a month, $3 a month, something like that, whatever, right? You charge people directly to use the platform. And then as a company, that's how you make money. Or maybe go to some tiered sort of platform where it's $2 a month and you'll get generic ads run, maybe no targeted ads. They say, you know what, we're not going to collect any personal information about you at all because you're paying us money. So if you pay us, $2 a month or some smaller amount, then we're just going to run general ads periodically, not targeted against you personally. And then if you want to pay a few bucks more a month, say $5 a month, then no ads at all. Treat it like we do with streaming services, right? Hulu's a great example of this. You can pay a few bucks a month and get all the content, but there are going to be some commercial breaks in there, or you can pay a bit more, get access to all that content still, but no ads. Maybe that's one way to do it. The problem with that, though, is those companies that end up going under, because, and this is probably a separate podcast topic in and of itself, but to briefly touch on it, and I'm sure a lot of you would agree, everyone wants everything for free on the internet. Why would anyone want to pay for Facebook? Why would anyone want to pay for Twitter? Anything like that? Even if there are no ads, even if they do a really good job at moderating and cleaning up all the stupid arguments and everything, getting people to play nice, and they actually become pleasant places to spend time online. Why would anyone want to pay for that? Everyone is so used to getting things for free online now that I think going to a paid model, or going exclusively to a paid model with no free tier, ultimately would be the undoing of all those companies. They'd go under, and they know it, which is why we haven't really seen anything like that getting floated. The final option is the simplest one, although it's going to be the most difficult one to actually get any major traction behind, and that is to just stop using it. Or don't get into it to begin with. I am not a Facebook user. There's a reason, because of this kind of crap. I don't like the way Facebook operates. I don't find anything really of value on Facebook either. So that's generally why I've just strayed away from it. And I feel like I am better for it. I feel like in the very least, that's time in my day that I've gotten back that I haven't had to spend periodically going through Facebook and, looking through all the probably garbage that gets trolled up and I didn't want to read anyway. And all that, because these platforms are kind of addicting and they do encourage you to check them periodically. So I've focused on Twitter and Instagram, and Twitter, generally decent. There's a lot of garbage on Twitter too. Instagram is the interesting one, where I feel like Instagram's actually a pretty decent community. I feel like most of the interaction on Instagram is fairly positive. So I think maybe there's something going for it there. And I think a lot of that's just due to the limits on how you can communicate on Instagram and the way it works. You can't just post up this big, long text diatribe about, your feelings on politics and the economy and all that kind of crap and let people get into these big flame wars with you. It generally on Instagram, it's you're posting a picture and you're trying to get approval for the picture itself, whether it was composed well or shot well, or it's a cool location, just a cool picture, whatever. So I think maybe because of the way Instagram works, it ends up being a better example of social media done right or done better. Facebook's probably one of the worst ones. Twitter's kind of somewhere in the middle, but maybe we walk away from it. Maybe we get people to say, you know what? There's nothing of overly redeeming value on any of these platforms. Maybe we just need to put them all down for a little while and learn how to talk to each other again. Let's actually put our phones down at dinner and talk to each other, talk to our family, talk to our friends, instead of just sitting there and, our hands, up against our face with the phone there, sitting there scrolling through and hitting like and all that kind of crap. Maybe we need to put it down. That's going to be tough. I think that's going to be very tough. That'll be a really hard sell. But, if we are as serious about privacy as all the people who get worked up about it when these scandals come out really are, that's really the best solution, is don't let them collect that data on you to begin with. Don't reward them for bad behavior. Anyway, I am, of course, curious as to your thoughts. How deeply embedded are you into social media? Do you use all the platforms? Do you just use a few? What are your thoughts on them? Would you be willing to walk away from them if you do use them? If you didn't get into social media, is this kind of stuff the reason why, or is there some other reason why you just never got into it? I'm just curious as to your thoughts, so be sure to leave them in the comments down below. Also, if you're interested in audio-only versions of these podcasts, I have them available for Patreon supporters at all contribution levels. They go up as plain MP3 files. You can download them, put them on whatever device you want. They usually go live a few days before showing up here on YouTube, so that's a bit of an added bonus. And on top of that, Patreon supports private RSS feeds, so you can throw it into the podcast player of your choice and get that file delivered to you automatically as soon as it goes live. So if you're interested, that's just, something to think about. Anyway, if you like this one, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.